Hello, everyone. Welcome to another amazing, epic, legendary episode of Bikini and the Brain podcast. Yes, you clicked the right link. This is the Bikini and the Brain podcast, and we are so glad to have you guys today. Not only do we have you listeners joining us, we also have a super special guest who has blessed our computer screen and now your speakers. We're talking to the lovely.
So today we are talking to the lovely me, Adam Bonilla.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Just
You're
kidding.
here too. I forgot. Oh, sorry. I just hyped you up a little bit. Sorry.
No, today we are talking to someone who's almost as lovely, Celeste Turk. So if you guys don't know who she is, she runs a Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. She works with competitors who basically works with competitors who may be struggling a little bit with the relationship with food. She has a degree in psychology and is currently working on getting her master's degree in clinical mental health. And basically she works with athletes to build more than just a body and have their most successful, fulfilling and empowering preps and improvement seasons on the kind of the mental side of things. So really, really happy to work with you and have you on today. If you guys don't know, I've had, whenever we run into these types of issues where people are kind of having, I guess, food relationship issues, I have Celeste work with them, with my athletes. She's worked with quite a few of them for the last probably, I don't know, a little over 6 months, 9 months or so, I don't know. But, you know, everyone has their areas of expertise. Mine is in program design. And I think that it's important to have someone like this in your corner, because I think too often athletes expect the coach to be like the best at everything in the world. And I'm like, no, my job is to be the best that I can be at program design and get you in shape. Other people's job to be the best at other things. And so I love having you work with our girls. So thanks so much for doing that when we run into that need. So anything you want to add to that? Wonderful.
No, that's awesome. I appreciate it. I'm so happy to be here. And it's always a pleasure working with your girls. And I admire and appreciate that we can both honor each other's, professions and the things that we're good at, and then feed off of those strengths so that these girls can have the best preps and improvement seasons. I think that's the most important part, is the teamwork. So I appreciate you trusting me.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate you. And this is a very great time to have her part of our podcast, because, a lot of people are having a mental struggle with, shows not happening, things are shutting down. Maybe they don't have their routine that they're used to doing. We're creatures of habit, especially in the fitness industry. And as I always say, this sport is just as important to have a great mental game than your training and diet. It all ties in. And motivation, good mindset is the best pre-workout you can actually get, because if your mind's not there, your mind's not right, you're not going to be performing correctly. So with that being said, what do you think right now the most common struggle is that you're hearing from competitors or girls reaching out to you?
So right now with the current situation?
Yeah, the current situation. What situation is that? I haven't heard anything abnormal. Is there something going on? I don't know. It's Sunday. It's Sunday. It's hard for some people, I guess, on Sundays.
Right now, I would say the major thing people are struggling with is uncertainty of when their show is going to be. And then also mindless eating, mindless snacking, going off plan because of that uncertainty. It's kind of like, well, because I don't know, then this doesn't matter as much. Or, oh, I'm really good when I have a show date, but without it, I'm not very good. So those are some of the struggles that I see a lot of girls having with the uncertainty as it presents itself.
Okay. Let's go into that first, because that's something like as a coach. Here's the thing about like as being a coach that I kind of don't understand sometimes. I'm still like working on getting better at this stuff. And it's funny because and I told you this before too, my ex-girlfriend, Hannah, she was going to school for psychology too. And she'd always be like, she's the one that kind of got me into the whole like mental side of things, right? She's like, she used to give me like these backhanded compliments, which are really funny. She's like, I think that you're probably one of the best coaches that there is out there, but you're really bad at the mental part of it. She's like, you just don't get it. Like, you don't get that it's hard for people, And I got that. That was like, over a year ago. I think we're like 2 years ago we dated. And And I was like, really? You think that? She's like, yeah, you just don't get it because you just never had a problem sticking to your diet because you're a wrestler and you're a prep and you're just like, just do what you got to do. And that was always kind of like my mindset. It was like, well, of course prep's hard. Then don't do it if you don't want to do it. So it's like, that was always like my mindset. So over the years I've gotten better at it and kind of been more open to it. But what is the relationship that you see between people really adhering to their diet when they have a deadline and then just not being able to adhere to the diet when there's no deadline? Why can't it be both, right? Why is it such a drastic difference? What do you think the reason for that is?
Oh my gosh, seriously, this is something that I toyed with a lot in the beginning, because I was very similar to you in that, how do you not stick to your plan 100% on prep? Like, how is that hard? Like, why is this a problem? Why are so many girls struggling with this? If this is something you want, something you love, should be easy to do. But you know, the more I learned and exposed myself to it and even struggled after shows, I realized, oh, there was a disconnect. And I think the number one thing that I think keeps girls from being able to stick to things, whether there's a date or not a date, is identity and self-worth. So how those two things relate is, you know, if you have an identity of someone who's worthy and deserving of the results they desire, you're going to be more likely to take the action steps necessary to achieve those results, regardless of a show date. And if you truly love the lifestyle and your identity is someone who loves the lifestyle and finds ways to be sustainable, and it's not something that's super challenging, which can build a lot of resistance to actually committing to the action steps, then it's going to be easier to do it regardless of a date. And I think, you know, me and Ashley, we've been prepping through this whole entire thing and just kind of going with it. And I've been able to maintain my results and continue to achieve results. And same thing with Ashley. And I think the thing that we talked about in one of our episodes too is just, we stayed focused on the lifestyle, and that's what's kept us going. And we've trusted that it's going to happen. And I think a lot of girls get too caught up in the show date and not the lifestyle itself.
Right. I agree with you 100%. And I am one of those people that I find that this is just my identity. At the same time, even I find a little bit of a struggle in it, because although I can stay 95% on point and stay pretty close to show date, it's so hard to do that final 2-week or 3-week or 1 month push to get to 100% with the uncertainty. So that's something that I've lately been struggling with, but I'm starting to see, like, you know, it's more consistent now. And, you know, hopefully we can get more like of, rather than half the shows going through more, you know, maybe 90%, but, you know, it's something that we have to keep in the back of our mind. Yeah, it might get canceled, but you got to stay on it. I think another thing for me is I do have like a small fear of getting out of shape, to where, because I know how hard it is to get back into shape once you get out of it. So I don't ever want to go to the extreme off-season zone, because I have that fear that, oh, if I go, that's like the point of no return. So I think maybe it's an unhealthy way to think, but I also have that fear of, you know, going a little bit too far into the off season. What is your perspective on that, as getting too out of shape as a fear? Is it a healthy mindset to have, or is it more of a toxic thing?
I love that you just asked that, because I think a lot of people would think that I'd be like, oh, that's really unhealthy, or you shouldn't be motivated. But that's absolutely not how I feel. I think that a healthy mindset looks different for everybody, and that's very dependent on how you actually feel about the mindset and how it influences your actions and your behaviors. So for example, you seem to be someone who's motivated by the pain of how it would feel to then have to work your way back to where you are now and beyond, and the pain of knowing that your results could be sacrificed, the hard work you've put in. There's other people who are motivated by pleasure, so they may be more motivated by the way it'll feel to step on that stage, knowing that they didn't backtrack, or the feeling that it'll be like to look in the mirror. Like, there's different motivators, and if that's what keeps you going, then that, I believe, is healthy, because it's the best thing for you to stay, you know, on point with your goals and feeling good about yourself and most connected to your best version.
Okay, makes sense. Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah, I'm diving. I keep listening to this, and I'm like more diving into it, and I keep going back to, here's the thing I struggle with, like, as a coach, and it drives me crazy. It's the people who do shows, and then they finish their show. They might go through the correctional phase for, you know, good for a month. And honestly, a lot of people just disappear after the shows too, which as a coach, you know, I hate that, because that's like the most vulnerable time for someone to be gaining, you know, body fat back. And as an athlete, just so you guys know, the most critical time is right after the show. Everyone's like, oh, there's this thing called the anabolic amplifier effect, which is like this theory that you'll put on a lot of muscle really quickly after a show because you're highly anabolic. So your fat cells are highly anabolic after a show. Like they are really ready to put on body fat right after a show. They are super susceptible to doubling in size, like literally right after the show, because of all the things that you've been doing to deprive them of their normal self, right? They're basically their set point. So what I really want to kind of like, when I'm hearing that is, you know, I keep hearing like deadlines being the goal. How does someone go to lifestyle being the goal? You've talked about this being the lifestyle, but how does someone get there? What are like the commonalities you see between people who are there that like kind of live lean? And I don't want to get anyone confused. I'm not talking live lean as in, and this gets confused all the time. I'm not saying live show lean. That's not a thing. You know, I don't think that if you're shredded all year long, show ready, that's a healthy scenario. But, you know, 10 pounds above stage weight, very realistic for someone to be there. Now, how does someone kind of make that transition to get there if they're not like motivated after the show? They're only motivated by a deadline. They're only motivated by the wedding date or the beach, the vacation. Like, how does someone get there and stay motivated if they're not just naturally there?
Yeah, if they're not naturally motivated by things outside of like deadlines and due dates and things of that nature, then this is where intention setting is going to be really important. So kind of like I guess a 3-phase process you could walk yourself through is identity. So who you are becoming or who you want to become in this new phase or circumstance. So in your improvement season, let's say, and then the intentions. So what intentions or commitments are necessary in this phase for you to actually fulfill that identity. So if for you to come out of the show healthy without rapid fat gain, even if you go, 15 pounds over, but it wasn't so rapid and horrible and, filled with guilt and shame, what would be required? And then the last piece of that is impact. So what's the impact of your intentions? And is that impact sustainable? So for example, if someone's going, oh, after my show, I just want to let loose and live again. And then the intention with that is I'm going to go out to dinner with my friends every week. And then the impact is I gain, 7 pounds in my first week post show. And then you go, oh, well, that doesn't fully align with my number one objective, which is to maintain or to do really well or to head into another show in maybe 3 months or make the most out of this time period. So I think that's, a good process to walk through is setting intentions and accepting that your improvement season is allowed to and is going to look different than your prep. And that means that the result is going to change too. So how do we actually accept that? We have to be prepared for what's to come and prepare for the potential obstacles that come with it. When people just focus on a date, then they're motivated by that date and how they're going to look on the date and what other people are going to think about them on the date, how they're going to feel on that date. But it's like, well, what happens after that? How do you want to feel? How can you allow yourself to embrace that lifestyle? What are the things necessary, the commitments, and what can carry over from, prep into your improvement season? And what do you need to let go of so you can actually sustain it?
That's all good information. And I don't think a lot of people even think past their show date. They think, I'm going to compete. And then after they're done, they're just like, now what? So that's so good that you point that out. And it's something to think about even before you compete, when you're in your last month or whatever. Like, what is the plan for after? What am I going to do? How am I going to feel? And what's going to make me happy, because some people get that post-show depression, which I know you've talked a little bit about. And it's a thing, it's kind of like, well, what now? What am I doing with myself? And I feel like slight amount of like, for me right now, I feel a little bit, I don't know, out of the loop because I haven't been competing and I haven't been seeing my people and I haven't been on stage. So I feel so, I don't know what the word is, kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, you can say it. I don't believe
it's part of my identity.
She's like, I feel irrelevant. I'm like, Ashley, you're never going to be relevant.
But it is a thing. So I can imagine like a lot of girls come to you with that issue. They're just like, a big event happened, lots of endorphins, lots of adrenaline. And then it's like a crash after the show. Like, now what? You have your cheat meal and then now what?
Yeah, I get that. That's probably like one of my, and I think every single coach gets this too, where they'll get like someone that's talking about doing prep with them, like, hey, yeah, I have a show in like it'll be something crazy too. It'll be like 17 weeks, 18 weeks, right? And they're getting ready for their prep. Like, yeah, I'm ready to go. I have about 3 days and then I'll sign up for the 16-week prep so I can do 16 weeks. And I'm like, well, so you're going to just prep to the day of the show and then never talk again? Like you're just done? Like, that's not how this works. Like I can tell you how that scenario goes. You're going to get ripped and then I'm going to see you 6 months later after you're up 20 pounds. Like that's how that scenario is going to go, because you have zero intentions already. You're setting yourself up for not going through that proper correctional phase, So, and I see that happen so much. I hear it all the time. But when you were talking, you said 2 things and I want to kind of dive into them a little bit. It's never gonna get old. So if you guys you just listening, Ashley's doing the diving thing.
Anytime he says dive in, I dive in.
She dives in with her hands, like doing the motion of going into water. Oh, this is what I live with like 90% of my life.
Poor Adam.
I know, right? But you said identity, and then you said also live again, right? And so I still struggle with the whole live again thing. I have a really messed up mindset for this whole like getting better. I'm trying to get better as I can at this, like the mental side of it. Because I'm like, I just grew up with this, so I don't know anything different. I've done this since I was 14 years old. I've never taken days off. Like, I just don't get anything but this, So to me, it's like, this is living. This is how you live. You eat healthy all the time. There's nothing else. Like, I don't know why that wouldn't be living, So me, and like eating healthy and just living and not eating like crap is how you're supposed to do it. Like but to other people, it's a totally different concept, right? So you're saying, you're like, oh, I just want to live again. You said someone was doing a show and, oh, I just want to live again. What do you think the reasons for that is? And do you think it's like the old school preps that are causing people to do that? Or do you think it's just, they were not in the right mindset to actually compete anyway? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. And I absolutely believe that these types of things do not just show up for people who follow like old school bodybuilding or bro science or whatever. I've worked with plenty of girls who follow macro-based approaches and struggle with the same thing. Work with plenty of girls who do bro science, plenty of girls who do mixed. The problem is not in the plan. Okay. This is again why I think, you stick to your guns as a coach and I stick to mine. It's because the plan isn't going to change what's actually happening internally. Now, of course, there's things that can change about the plan that can help. I think that if someone is being if part of it's restriction, let's say, if they're feeling too restricted, then how can we make sure we find some sort of middle ground? Maybe that does look a little different than how the coach would normally approach things, but if it means more longevity, the coach is going to support that. Now, in terms of living again, I think this is an issue of heading into a prep with certain expectations. I think a lot of people are so quick to give up life or what living means to them before heading into a prep that, especially when they do their first show, it's all about the competition. I'm going to let go of all these different other areas of my life and just focus on the competition. So when that show ends and now there's definitely not another show coming up, that's their only frame of sticking to a plan or following some sort of programming. The only frame of reference they have is when it's for a particular goal. So that is a problem. When you're entering into a prep, when you're entering into, let's say, a diet or any sort of lifestyle phase, even if you're doing a pre-prep, you have to really ask yourself, what do you still want out of your lifestyle? What do you want to change? What do you want to be the same? What would you be really upset about? Like, I'll give the example of like Taco Tuesday. Someone might be like, I never want to miss a Taco Tuesday. You have to tell your coach that, because that could make the difference between you working with them for the next 16 weeks or the next 24 weeks. And if you're not prepared for the impact of your decisions or the lifestyle you want to live, then don't expect the results that are going to come from it or aren't going to come from letting it go. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think intention is important going into it, knowing what are you actually really willing to commit to and give up. And what are the things you're absolutely not willing to budge on? And you have to communicate that with your coach rather than just, I'm going to commit all into this and then struggle after because now you're readjusting. There shouldn't be a readjustment. It should just be even.
Okay. I'm the same. I tried to, when I get inquiries and stuff or talk to people, I try to go about that same route. Because they'll be like, well, what kind of diet do you do? What kind of this do you do? And I'm like, I do all diets. I don't care what the diet is. They're all really close to being the same level of effectiveness. So I say, the best diet is one you can stick to. Otherwise, there's no point, right? So having those little adjustments. The other day I had a girl, she's like, I just have to have 2 glasses of wine. I was like, all right, well, let's figure out those calories. Let's throw that on there twice a week. And if you don't have them one week, great. If you do have them, great. So it was a pretty nominal difference. So like a Taco Tuesday, that's workable. It's like a workable scenario. So, okay. So that's helpful. And I think that actually a lot of it I thought was when a girl goes from, maybe doing an hour and a half of cardio a day to not having a show and obviously not having the desire to do an hour and a half of cardio a day, to just being like, I'm just done. I'm just so done. Like, I don't know if there's some correlation with that of girls doing really aggressive preps. And then at the end of prep, they're just like, I'm just done. And something they used to love becomes something they kind of hate now because it's turned into work versus their fun time of release. So I don't know, is that something that you see being like a common thing with competitors? I don't know how that goes on that side of things.
Yeah, like there's like a set level of burnout that can definitely come from it, and this desire can waver a little bit when we're so committed over and over and over again. Sometimes it's just fatigue. It's like commitment fatigue almost. You've been committed to something for so long, you're getting fatigued, or you've been making decisions all day, you've been committed to something all day, so you get fatigued, and by the end of the day, other things start to open up. You start thinking of something. Maybe that's when you start turning to food, or you veg on the couch or whatever. But regardless, there's some level of fatigue that could be there. And I think that girls who go from, I'm going to be 110% on my plan to, I'm not going to follow my plan at all. The problem is not so much in the plan itself or the program itself. It's in the thought process around it. What we have to do is connect those commitments, those requirements of our plan and those changes to our values as people, to our values and the things that we like. How does committing to your plan actually serve you in, spending time with your friends and being a good family member? How does it serve you in your career to continue to do your 1.5 hours of cardio or whatever it is you were doing a day, and shift the process or the focus from, oh, how does this impact my body and my aesthetics to look good on stage, to how does this influence my life in other areas that I'm now kind of choosing to focus on more?
This is all good. And I think it's kind of goes hand in hand with this word we hear a lot in the industry as well. Balance. You hear this word getting tossed around all the time. I need balance in my life. But really, what is balance? And what is your definition of balance? Because it's a tough sport, because like Adam brought up earlier, in this sport, you have to kind of be a little bit, if you want to be really good, you got to be a little bit obsessed. So a lot of people are having issues with this word balance because it's different for everyone.
Exactly. It's different for everyone. And that's, on my personal journey, I had to learn that. And I learned that the hard way. I had those improvement seasons that turned into like full on, not so good. Now I'm working my way back up. And then I had improvement seasons that were really intentional and good. And I put on a lot of size. And then I had some that were more health focused. And my balance came from what was the most important thing in that moment and what really mattered to me. And the times when I felt out of balance were the times where I wasn't actually sticking to the commitments I set for myself. And I think that balance is this like elusive thing that we equate to every single thing in our life being, on point, and we're crushing it in all these different areas, or we can have family and we can win a pro show or whatever it is. And I think that's okay, and you can want that, but you have to be prepared for what those new commitments mean, what your priorities mean, and how they shift. So personally, I think balance comes from consistency. If you are doing something consistently, whether it's a time that one of your goals is this and another priority is that, you're consistent regardless, like maybe a routine or something you're committed to, then you're going to feel more balanced than if you just constantly are changing what you're focused on. So you choose, right? You have to have that consistency, that routine that allows you to feel like there's always a balance, regardless of if you're more focused on a prep or on your family, or I don't even know why we even say or. Like, I personally have no problems. Like Adam was saying, this is something that, okay, I don't mean I have no problems, but I have no problem with making this lifestyle a priority. It's more so like we have to let go of what everybody else tells us balance has to be. Like, just let it go, focus on what balance means for you, and be willing to actually write it out. Write out what is having a balanced prep look like. If I know I'm going into a prep, then that means I'm not going to have as much time for friends because now I'm committed to X amount of posing and cardio or whatever. Well, how do I make up for that loss of connection that I'm going to be missing? And then you put a new tool or tactic in place. So we have to set ourselves up to maintain a balance without it being the same thing.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
Yeah, I think that you touched on something important there too, which I think is really probably the most important thing you said in there is like using other people's definitions of balance. You know, I think that's a critical mistake, because if someone were to look at my life, they would say, oh, he has no balance, right? Because I have absolutely no balance, but I love what I do. Like, luckily, I love what I do so much that if someone was like came to me like, hey, you have a real problem with balance, I'm like, I don't care, because I actually love doing what I do. Like, I would do it for free. So, I would do it all day long, and I don't really have relationships outside of this. I don't have friends I hang out with. Can't even tell you the last time I hung out with a friend, like, besides Ashley. Like,
we are such fitness nerds.
All we do. It's all we do. Like,
nerds.
Literally, I go to work all day. I work. The weekends I travel for shows, and then I'm in the office, and then I'm researching. That's it. Literally my entire life. But if you look at some of these guys that are that talk about, I mean, you could look at like Gary Vee's a good example. I don't know if you get listen to him or know who he is, but he's like basically he's kind of like, he'd be like a motivational speaker / entrepreneur, more entrepreneur, but like, he's just like, I don't care. I crush it. He's like, and I'm the best at what I do. And I just love what I do so much. I don't care if I have that. And on the weekends, he spends time with his family. That's how he has his balance. So, but for me, it's like, my balance is trying to be the best and having impact in this industry as much as I can before I die. I honestly, probably to the point where it'll probably shorten my lifespan, because I just work so hard. But that's all I know what to do with my life. And I love it so much. It kind of identifies me. And I know that's not the healthiest thing, but I love it. So I don't see the problem with that being my balance, if that is the case, because
it's the same as me, as a competitor. It sounds just like me, but as a competitor.
It's a high, and that's the thing with it's funny, because I have friends that are it makes my friends when I was really younger, it makes sense that you do this now, because when you were younger, everything you did, that's all you did. And you just disappear. And when you stopped, you'd hang out with us for a little while, and then you'd disappear again. And it was the same thing with baseball, with hockey, with wrestling, with everything I've done. And I'm afraid to do anything else. I won't even play with anything else, because I'm afraid I'll get obsessed with it, because I know my traits, So I'm afraid to pick up a video game, because I know what'll happen. I know I'll just drop my life and literally just be it's just how it is. Mine just happens to be fitness, right? And Ashley is very similar, very similar. And I think
we a big problem is you hear a lot of the outside influences telling you what your balance should be like. Yeah. They look at your life wait, you just work out all the time, and you don't ever eat pizza, and you can't have drinks. Your life sucks. That sucks. I would never want to do that. Yeah. But those people, you don't really see them doing anything successful. Yeah, that's the thing. It's the average person. Do you want to be average, or do you want to be awesome? And I want to be awesome. Yeah. So I love what I do. I do use this as part of my identity, I guess you could say. And I'm just like you, except for as a competitor. I obsess over it, but it makes me happy. Yeah. And I don't think I'm harming myself. I'm pretty sane. I have it together. So I like my life. Yeah, it's hopefully you're not over there being these two are Shame on that. Shame on that.
These two hyper obsessed people.
We love our lives though. Yeah. I mean, we got an awesome life. We talk to each other all the time. I love my life. I get to travel the world. I get to see new things. I get to experience a lot of events that many people will never have the chance to do, because I compete, because I'm into fitness. So it's I don't go out with you on the weekends for pizza and beer, but you also don't go to Japan to compete. Yeah. So I don't go to Japan.
Us meeting probably amplified our obsessions by 20%. It's probably a really unhealthy thing. So this is freaking out over there. But,
no, I'm not. I'm totally on page with you guys. I feel the same way. I'm very committed to my work. I'm always I'm nonstop too. It's everything that I love is what I'm committed to. And I think that if someone's listening going, I wish I was like that. And I know that's the case, because I hear girls say, I wish I was more like so-and-so. How does Ashley do it? How does Adam do it? Why are these people expecting this thing? So these people expecting that. And I think we have to take a step back and go, if these different dimensions of our life are being fulfilled, then we can say we have balance. So it sounds like you guys socially fulfill yourselves through this sport. You emotionally fulfill yourself through the sport, intellectually, in a way where you're occupationally being fulfilled in this sport. There's an environmental sense, you're experiencing different cultures. So all these different areas of wellness and balance are being fulfilled in this hyper obsession, and that's okay. That's your version, and other people have to accept that they're gonna have their own version. And then I think within the industry, we also have to be kind and have grace with people whose versions don't look like ours, who maybe it's not ideal for them to be nonstop all the time. And as hard as it is to sometimes understand those people, if we put it into context of, okay, what does this person actually want? Where are they getting fulfillment from? Now we can breed understanding, and we can see, how does that relate to our life? Or, oh, I see where that makes sense for them.
Yeah, I like that. I'm glad this is a fun talk, you know?
E for fulfillment.
Yeah, for fulfillment.
Woo, high five to you for fulfillment.
High five, yeah. Yeah, it's something, you know, and I think that maybe the listeners can view it too, because it's something that, like, I think I struggled with it for a while, where I was like, I guess I was listening too much to other people's like definition of balance, and, oh, you're a workaholic, you're a thisaholic. And then, like, over the years, it's like, it slowly shifted. And I was like, you know what, but I'm probably happier than you when I'm in my office, what you would call grinding away, you know, because I'm having impact in the world, you know, and I want to have the most impact I can. And so, I don't know, just for me, it was this, I did find fulfillment in it. Now, obviously we're the extremes, and the masses are not going to be the extremes. So I guess we got to go back to how is this whole thing, how does someone maintain in the off season when they're not those hyper obsessed people? You know, they're not and I like to compare it to like the Michael Jordans and the Kobe Bryants and all these guys who you look at their lifestyles and what they did to get to be the best at their sport, and they literally lived it from morning till night. Most of the best people in the world at what they do are, I think people would kind of say they have a problem with it, because it takes so much out of you to be at that upper level. But like, let's say the person who wants to get there, right? Maybe they want to get their psyche to that level too, of wanting it that bad. Like, is that something you could even do? Is that something you could force? Or that just come from a within passion that you just can't control? Like, how does that, for me, I can't control it. Like, I've tried, I just can't. And I'm probably going to die behind my computer one day and just be like, that's just, there's no way around it. Actually, there's no way around it. How am I going to stop? It's just not
Can't stop, won't stop.
It's just not possible. I can't. I remember I was on vacation once. I was like, I've taken one vacation in my entire life. And it would just, people would be like, oh, that's crazy, it's unhealthy. Like, what's the point of having a successful business? I'm like, having a successful business has nothing to do, like, I have zero desire for the money of it. Like, it's just a natural progression of trying every day. That's all it is. And so, yeah, I've been on one vacation. And then when I went on it, I was like answering emails as soon as we got service, because I was in the middle of the ocean. I was like, I got service. Like, let's answer emails. And so, I don't know, for me, it became like, I just love it. I don't know how to live any other way. How does this become like how does someone get to that next level, stay dedicated all the time, but still have their level of balance? How does that happen?
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate what you just said about the vacation thing, because it makes me think about how unfair it is to try to fulfill someone else's idea of balance when it takes away from our own, because then when we're with them or we're off doing whatever they think is balance, all we're thinking about is the thing that really brings us fulfillment and happiness and joy. And that's such a disservice to anyone we're speaking with or anyone we're spending time with. Like, that's not worth it. You know, that's not fair. Your energy is dispersed. But anyway, if someone wants to become obsessed, right, I do believe this is something we can create or teach. I believe it's much stronger when it's innate and it's something you find and you develop, especially at a young age, or that's conditioned in you. But I also believe it's possible beyond that. And how do we do that? Conditioning. I really believe it comes down to conditioning. So think about the last time you were obsessed with something or really into it. Maybe it was a Netflix show. Maybe it was some, game that you played as a kid. What was it that made you obsessed? And then how can you create that same emotional response within you when it pertains to the lifestyle or the identity or the person you want to become? And when you identify what those connections are, you can essentially emulate or create anchors for them. So here's an example. If you know that watching the Netflix show sucked you in and you got obsessed with it because it was suspenseful and it was riveting and you didn't know what was going to happen next. Well, how can I have suspense and this riveting feeling and this a little bit of unknown territory in the lifestyle that I want to live? Well, maybe that's, okay, I'm going to get excited about this new plan that I'm on, and I'm going to mix up the types of food that I'm eating, a little bit of unknown in the recipe or what I'm going to make in the kitchen this week. Or maybe it's riveting in that you don't know exactly how you're going to look in 3 months time. There is that unknown uncertainty. And so you got to commit to it and keep watching, keep playing, keep doing whatever it is. So we can make those connections. That's one way. Another way is through just conditioning, period. So creating neural pathways that connects you between what it is that you're doing and a positive result or positive reinforcement. So I think a lot of people have negative reinforcements when it comes to dieting, when it comes to changing their body or committing to some new goal. There's negative reinforcements in that it's hard, it's not fun, it's taking away from this. So we have to create positive reinforcements. We see this happen in prep. The weight drops. Coach says, good job, you're on track. That's a positive reinforcement. So now, you're in your off season, you want to still be obsessed with it, create a positive reinforcement. Okay, I stuck to my plan, or I was able to find a new way to create, this food, or I communicated honestly with my coach. What's a positive reinforcement for that? I felt X way, or I noticed that I was more energized in my workouts, or I still received kudos from my coach, or I gave myself kudos in this way, I expressed love in this way. So now we're creating conditioning that, is coming from reinforcements, positive and negative, to either enforce the behavior we want or take us away from it. So every time, we're thinking, oh, I'm just going to go off my plan, pattern interrupt, do something else, whether that means now you're going to try to say the alphabet backwards, or you're going to go and do like a couple sprints or high knees, something to interrupt the pattern, to show you that that's not the pattern you're choosing anymore. So I believe it's absolutely teachable, but in order to become obsessed, you have to be willing to then set aside things that take you away from the obsession. You have to be willing to actually invest your energy into it and know what's going to come when you do that, and know what you're going to lose when you do that too.
So a question for you. You can teach yourself to become obsessed, but can you teach yourself, or can you force yourself to be motivated? Or is it just something, whenever you're talking about becoming obsessed, it's something that something you don't start to not really even think about, like more of a habit? Does that make sense? So can you, on days, he's always motivated all the time, but sometimes I have days where I'm just I'm not. Yesterday was one of those days. I didn't sleep very well. I was just
you're a grumpy bear.
Grumpy. Think of that cat, the grumpy cat meme. That was me yesterday.
It was so sad. It was so sad.
It was sad. It was not a good day.
Bicep curls.
But yeah, it's true. Some days I am not motivated. I think it has more to do with my mood, maybe sleep. But is there a way to force yourself to be motivated, or does motivation come kind of without your control?
Yeah, I don't know 100% on this one. Based on things that I've done or things that I've seen with other people, is if we can connect those things to our values, the things that we're trying to be motivated by, we're going to become more motivated because it becomes a non-negotiable. I think what we have to seek out is less motivation and more determination, and more the things that are non-negotiables in our life. It is a non-negotiable, actually, for you to show up and train. It is a non-negotiable item for you to show up and work. That's just what you do. It's a non-negotiable because you know it's going to get you where you go. So you don't second guess actually doing it. It's the process of going to do it. Like you were saying, Ashley, with going to work out, that can be hard sometimes. And that's when we have to go, what happens if I don't do this? Mm-hmm. Especially for you, motivated by pain. What happens if I don't do this? That would be a huge question, because then you're well, I might not XYZ, or I'm putting this at risk or this at risk. And if we connect it to our deeper values, let's say that's impact, freedom, love, family, contribution, philanthropy, whatever your core soul codes, your values are, we can connect it to that. The little things, they become easy to do, and we don't question it as much.
Yeah, I like that when it becomes just normal, like taking a shower. You have to take a shower. that's how I tell people where they got to get with their gym, you know, like when they're in the gym, like, yeah, no, working out isn't that hard once you get into the fact of, oh, I got to go to the gym today. You know, it's just like taking a shower. Oh, I got to eat today. Got to drink water today. Got to go to the gym today. Like that's, to me, that's in the same sentence. You know, it's not like an efforted, oh, I got to make time. What do you mean I got to make time for the rest of everything else, but gym is just part of the day, you know? So if someone's having problems getting there, you kind of tapped into it. And is there any tips in particular that you would kind of go with, like where that you can maybe give someone advice to, where they're trying to get to that point of daily routine?
Stack your habits. So literally, if you have something that you do every single day, maybe that's you drive to the coffee shop, or you walk your dog, or you brush your teeth, I hope. Stack it with another habit. I can't do this until I do this new habit. So if you every day, you know, at the end of the night, you sit down on the couch and you read a good book. You cannot do that now until you go to the gym. Even if that means you sacrifice a little bit of sleep for now, get your ass up and go to the gym, and then read your book and fall asleep. And instead of maybe 20 minutes of reading, you're doing 10, but it's, you know, so you can create a new habit. And I think habit stacking is a really good first step. It's a palpable step for people because they know, like, we're kind of resisting that. Or we stack habit by saying, I only do XYZ when I'm ABC. So I only listen to this podcast when I'm going on a walk at this time of the day. And so sometimes that then keeps us from slacking off later or not making the time for those things. So habit stacking is a really great tool. And then, like I said, just identify your values and connect them to those things that you are committed to.
Very good. Habit stacking. I like that.
Yeah, stack them habits. Yeah. But that is so true. And I think I apply that to diet too, because a lot of times people are like, how can you eat the same thing over and over? Like a lot of chicken and vegetables. And for me, like, it's, you know, it's a habit. Like, it's like, I actually crave that food now, you know, I crave chicken and broccoli. And to me, nachos and cheese doesn't seem that good. I know it's crazy, right? Sometimes I'll have cravings every once in a while, but I've made it a habit, and I know that's what makes me feel good. And of course, I've learned how to flavor it and season it differently. But, you know, I think for me, I've been eating so good for a while that it's my habit, and I don't even think twice. And I have no interest in nachos and cheese.
Yeah, I find that the longer I'm clean, the less that food makes me feel good. Like if I eat something, it can get, there was a point where I think that it might have been an issue for me, how clean I ate for how long. I think it was probably years before I had a cheat meal at one point. It was probably like multiple years before I had anything bad. And that I wouldn't say that's probably not a good thing, but it got to the point where even when it was definitely over a year of me not eating clean. And then I had like a Western bacon cheeseburger, and that was like my favorite burger when I was a kid, was the Western bacon cheeseburger. And I got about 3/4 of the way through and I threw it up. And I was like, just because I couldn't handle it. I think maybe I went too far with that. But now I know, you know, when I eat clean, and if I have one bad thing like a week, I'm not going to blow up. I'm not going to gain a bunch of weight. And I used to think that way. You know, I used to be like, no, I just got to stick to the diet only. And now I'll have something, probably like once a week I'll have something. And I feel I have that, like, where I don't have that weird feeling anymore, where I feel super sick. I'm throwing up halfway through a burger type of thing, you know? So I think that people kind of go on both sides of that. They'll eat super, super clean, and then they get done with their prep, and then they go way to the other side of it, besides finding that middle ground. Do you have any, like, what happens with the mentality? And I know what happens like hormonally with like leptin and ghrelin, and your hunger hormones and satiety hormones are all over the place. And as soon as you eat something, your body just says, eat more of it, eat more of it. What is the mental part of that though? Where does that, someone going so clean and then all of a sudden all they're eating is junk food and they're blowing up, gaining 40 pounds post show? And I say 40 pounds is like, yeah, right, Adam, you're exaggerating. No, I've seen it happen like multiple times.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, easy. I would say it's below 10% would gain at least like 20 pounds, but it's probably in that upper 10%. Like it's like probably 8%, 9%. These aren't true stats. These are just what I see out there. And my only correlation I've seen between that and like, it has been slightly more aggressive preps where people are very low in calories and really, really high in cardio, where it's impossible to sustain that type of scenario long term. I always say if you can't sustain the prep, you can't sustain the conditioning, right? So if you use a style where it's sustainable to some degree, like you go from, let's say 35 minutes of cardio down to 20, well, that's not a huge difference, right? So you can sustain most of those results type of thing. But if you're going from, 1,000 calories, 800 calories to even 1,600, that's a big jump versus like 12 to 1,300 to 1,600. And going from, those cardio scenarios. So I've seen that being a correlation, but then I also see sometimes people just lose it. Like they just lose it, completely disconnected, never contact their coach again. And it sucks is that what sucked with that scenario is that the girls that were like so happy and so proud and so confident posting their pictures on Instagram, all of a sudden everything goes dark, right? On their Instagram. They're not posting it. They're not happy with the way they look, but they're still eating like crazy, right? Like way more than they were even doing before they started prep. And I don't understand what happens there. You have someone who is very fit, very conscious about their look, about their health, eating really good. And all of a sudden they're getting in shape and then decide, oh, I'm going to do a prep. And then they do a prep and then they get really in shape, right? They go from being pretty good shape to really good shape. And then they go past the point of being from pretty good shape to completely out of shape. Like what's happening there? Like, do you have any, like, I've always been curious of like what your take was on that. Like what triggers that?
Yes. Oh my gosh. My head is going so many directions because it can be different for different competitors and different girls. And the relationship with food is so interesting because I'll cover like a few things that come up. So first and foremost, one concept within like disordered eating behaviors and body image issues, but let's specifically focus on disordered eating behaviors, is restriction breeds fixation, which creates an intensified urge, which usually then leads to the behavior or the acting out or the binge, so to speak, or the overeating. So if we're restricted, whether that restriction, by the way, doesn't have to just be from a certain food. It could be caloric restriction. So that's why I said, it's not just about if it fits your macros versus a bro science diet. It can be a mental restriction, feeling constricted in the lifestyle, that could be a restriction that's being induced. And then the restriction could also be actual food. So we could have that. You've touched on the physiological aspects, which are important to consider because they tie into these psychological behaviors. So when someone's restricted and then they end up fixating on the food, let's say, then they end up going crazy because the urge intensifies and this F it, I'm just going to have all of it. Then what happens is this signals a neurotransmitter go off in the brain that says, good job, you participated in a life-sustaining behavior that, was probably previously limited to some degree for a prep, and it rewards you for that behavior. So again, going back to positive reinforcement, this is one of those ways that the brain does this. So it reinforces the behavior. Good job for eating. Let's do that again. How do we know it's doing that? Because we're feeling really good. Even if we feel like crap after, the brain's telling us this is a good behavior. So it wants us to continue the behavior. Even if our body responds poorly, we look in the mirror, we're not happy, we don't feel good about it, it was still a life-sustaining behavior that gets rewarded. So that's an aspect of it. Another thing that I think can happen comes down to what you were talking about with if it's not sustainable. We have to be willing to find what's going to work for us. This is something, I was one of those girls who gained 30 pounds in 3 weeks. Like, I've been there. It sucks. It's painful. It's painful mentally and emotionally more than it is physically, because you saw yourself as this super fit person. You were really proud of yourself. All these other people were really proud of you, following your journey, excited. Then something shifts and you're no longer that person. What the hell happened? I'm worse than before I started. How did this happen? And I've come to realize it's not about the food. It's not about the body anymore. It's strictly about how we're feeling about ourselves. And what I've found to be two of the most important things is, one, self-worth. Are you worthy of maintaining the results you've created? Why do you believe you are? Why do you believe you're not? And what's your evidence for both? And the second piece of this is coming down to, what do you need in order to be successful? So for me, I realized I was so caught up in being such a clean eater, perfect on my plan, everything to a T, nothing, no replacements macro-wise. I didn't even believe in that, no way, to, oh my gosh, I've blown up after my show. I feel restricted, but all these foods are off limits unless it's a cheat day, and then I'm binging on it. And then I realized, if I just had one of these every day, I'd be better off than having the freaking 20 I'm having on one day because of a binge and then feeling guilty and ashamed. So that was one of my steps, is kind of just starting to find ways to incorporate those foods. And then in a prep, I knew it was going to be a long prep. I was like, I have to have some sort of flexibility where if I'm craving an apple instead of the banana that's on my plan, it's okay if I have it. And that's something I had to communicate with my coach, like, is it okay if I make macro swaps? What's acceptable, what's not? And also advocating for myself. This is what I need. So those are some of the things that come to mind. The restriction, fixation, intensified urge, the binge, and then of course setting yourself up for being prepared for the physiological and psychological responses coming together, being rewarded for life-sustaining behavior. You're going to want to keep having it. And then the last piece is, allowing flexibility if that's what you need, and knowing that it's better to have one now than it is to have 10 guiltful ones later.
I like that. Another thing I kind of want to ask you along those same lines is, you mentioned these few causes of why that may happen, but do you think another one could be that let's say they just finished a show, maybe their expectations weren't met and they just threw it all away. Like, they were expecting to win the show. They were going to be the next it girl. They were going to go pro. They were going to win the Olympia this year. They were going to do all this. Like, their goals were out there. And then they didn't win their height class at a local NPC show, which I find a lot of times people, their expectations are very high, which we'll get into in a bit as far as goal setting. But do you find that could be one of the causes of, they just threw it away? They didn't meet their goals, so they just gave it up altogether.
100%. Yes. This is like self-worth on steroids, basically. It gets immediately questioned. The expectation you had, the way you saw yourself, the intensified emotion of I'm the best or I'm going to be the best is now all of a sudden in question. It's shot down. It's a big no. And you know what? I always tell people this. I'm like, this can be what lights your fire. It can be what puts your fire out. But at the end of the day, you're the one who has to make that decision. And the decision is going to be made to have it light the fire by the people who genuinely, I truly believe, like and love the lifestyle and who are passionate about it and who want more from themselves and demand more from themselves and identify as someone who expects more from themselves. Those are the people who are going to be set apart and end up winning and succeeding long term. Even if, it puts them in a mini depression for a little bit, they're going to be the ones who come back and fight harder. But yeah, absolutely. That's a major contributing factor, is your ego gets damaged, your expectation gets damaged, and now you don't want to live in this identity because, oh, apparently that's not how I am. Oh, apparently that's not true about myself. Rather than going, no, this is still true. It's just not true at this moment or based on this judge's feedback or this show result. We have to seek internal validation more than external validation. And so again, going back to show dates, going back to trophies, all those types of things, that's all external. You have to have the internal validation, the internal self-worth to know that is going to light your fire if it isn't the result you want.
Right. So let's go ahead and get into that goal setting section of this podcast, because I was dying to pick your brain about this, like goal setting. Now, both Adam and I are pretty realistic, I think, when it comes to goal setting. I think you're a little bit more of like a long-term goal setter. Like you think so far in advance, where I'm thinking of the very near future. I always say, for me personally, what has worked and how I go about setting my goals is I set small, realistic, attainable, yet challenging goals. But again, they're very realistic and they're small, so I can see them. And once I achieve that little goal, okay, we're going to move to the next. Okay, and the next. Even as I was competing as an amateur, at first I was like, I want to win my height class. Okay, I won my height class. Now I want to win an overall at my local show. Next, I want to go to nationals and place top 5. Next, I want to get a pro card. That's what's on the list next. And I was really successful at meeting my short-term goals. And I thought this was a great technique for me personally, because I never really got discouraged. I didn't set something too high and then for it all just to disappoint me. And I think a lot of times people just think so far in advance, and they're just get disappointed when they can't even meet the first step of their goal. I think setting goals that are too out there can often set yourself up for disappointment, and might give up along the way, because I don't know. I was like one of those people that's like, enjoy the journey, which I still believe to this day. You know, you got to make it fun, right? But what advice or what's your take on goal setting, and what's your approach to setting your goals?
Yeah, no, I love what you just said about your own goal setting, because I think people go in and they see someone like you or an athlete and they go, oh, well, I'm going to beat Ashley and have the most championships in bikini ever. I'm like, girl, you never stepped on stage before. Like, you don't even know if you like it. I mean, anyway, that's why I just think, you know, your journey is a great representation of how setting small goals can actually set you up for big success. I personally set long-term and short-term goals. Short-term goals that align with the long-term vision. So I guess I'm more of a visionary when it comes to big picture stuff. And then when it comes to getting there, very tangible in my efforts. And I think that, you know, the main reason for this is because it is something that we can commit to every day. I like tracking my habits daily. I like having a routine, but it's not coming from who I am now. It's coming from who I'm projecting myself to be and the results I'm projecting myself to have. So that is, I personally feel that is the best approach to goal setting, is to look at what is the goal you're trying to reach long term, and how does it apply to the things that you need to accomplish now. So I think setting daily goals is good, weekly goals is great, monthly, quarterly, all these things are important, but accept that those goals can change. People get so caught up not only in the goal, but in the execution of the goal, so wrapped up in the how that they forget about the why. They forget about the other opportunities or possibilities to achieving an end result. So, you know, someone might think the only way to be successful in this sport is to diet super hard, do tons of cardio, never eat anything, you know, and have to, you know, go to extreme measures, that they forget that there's other processes. And so they get so caught up in that. And so that's where goal setting can be tricky, is if we commit so much to one singular process rather than, you know, the little action steps that get us there. Remaining open, I think, to opportunities or possibilities of achieving those goals is really important too. So yeah, vision, big vision, and then small goals that get you to that big vision with acceptance of it changing.
Okay, so question for you. This might be a little bit broad, but what, in your opinion, is a realistic versus unrealistic goal, and how can somebody determine the difference? Because I feel like, for me, some people might say I'm pessimist. Like if somebody, for example, says you're gonna win the show next week, I'll be like, well, I'm gonna try my darn hardest, but we'll see. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of people might say, that's such a pessimistic way to look at your, you know, have some faith in yourself, you know? But me knowing that the sport is subjective, it could go so many different ways, I always try to keep that like in my mind, like, you know, I'm going to try my hardest. We'll see what happens. And that's all I can do, is try my hardest. And especially in a sport like we are in, you can only control yourself, right? You can't block a player, you know, you can't run faster than them. It doesn't make a difference. So you can only control what you bring to the stage that day. So with that being said, what advice would you give to people, or what is the difference between an unrealistic goal versus a realistic goal?
Yeah, so I mean, a realistic goal would look like something that you have some proof that you can actually achieve. You know, someone might say, oh, I'm going to be the best figure competitor, and yet they have never lifted weights in their life. This doesn't compute. This actually doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make sense. So we have to be realistic in the sense of like, what's actually common sense here? You're not going to become Miss Bikini Olympia if you've never even won at a regional level tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, you're not qualified for nationals. You're not an IFBB pro. Why are you thinking about the Olympia right now? Can you dream about the Olympia and be optimistic that one day your foot's going to step on that stage? So I don't think that we have to, you know, decipher between, oh, they're optimistic or pessimistic because of this. It's like, I don't even think that energy belongs in our goals. I think our goals have to be, you know, tangible efforts, and we can be optimistic about achieving them. And if we're pessimistic about achieving them, that's like a whole other issue. But you saying like, okay, well, I'm doing my best and we'll see what happens is still optimistic, because you're doing your best and you're focused on what matters right now. So I think a realistic goal is one that we have some proof or some, you know, we've taken some steps to achieve it. And it is something tangible. It is something that we have some experience in. And then an unrealistic goal would be something that we don't really have any prior development towards. There hasn't been a lot of work towards it. It's almost like you're just jumping off of a ledge, and there's no trampoline there yet, and you're like, well, so I'll figure it out when I get down there. It doesn't. How are you going to do that? You're going to die before you reach the bottom. So I don't think I don't know if I'm blabbing too much, but do you see what I'm saying? How it's about, there's got to be some sort of experience.
Logically, and like almost write it down, like,
yes.
What is the reason I can achieve this goal versus
yes.
like, if you don't have any proof that you could ever, it's more based on a thought, maybe more based on a dream or a hope to achieve a goal, rather than having proof that this is very likely I could achieve the goal.
And if you don't have proof, that's okay. That's where the habits come in. You know, you may want to compete and never compete before. That doesn't mean you can't have a goal of competing.
Right.
So don't get this twisted to those people listening who might think we're deterring you from that. But it's like, think of it from the perspective of, if you have a goal of competing, ask yourself, are you already living parts of that lifestyle that are necessary? Or is this going to be a huge jump? Was there a step A, B, and C before you commit to goal D? Still have goal D, but work your way backwards as well.
Yeah, I think that it's just your daily actions. That comes down to like daily actions, what you're talking about too. Because me in particular, I never really had like a set goal for like Team Elite Physique. It was just do better every day, work harder, do better, research more, put out a better physique. That was always it, every single day. But there was never really like, it was just daily actions, consistently doing that. And then it got to this crazy level where it's at now. And then I'll get young trainers that come to me like, I want to have that too one day. And I'm like, if you knew what it took, like over the last 20 years to get it here, like, and you can do that every day, more power to you. But like, don't even, because I didn't even want it here. I didn't even want it here. I didn't even have any plans ever to get it here. It just kind of like happened, and it just was scenario based. And I was like, oh, well, now we got to do our own thing. Now we got to have our own gym. Now, you know, so it was like always like scenario, like problem solving that got it here.
Yes.
So I don't think that you necessarily, like if people are like, oh, I just don't have that type of mindset, or like that's probably where we will have a little bit of where we defer a little bit. I'll see big things. Like today we're in this mega gym, and it was out of nowhere, and I'm super impulsive too. That's the problem. I'm super impulsive. and I was like, you know what? Why don't I build a gym like this one day? Like, why not? Like, why not? You know? And then so like all of a sudden something like that'll happen, and then the next thing you know, we're plans in action, you know? So like, I think that, I don't know if that's necessarily the best way of doing things, but for me, it was just like working my hardest every single day. And then the result came of it, but it was never like a big picture thing. It just kind of kept happening. So I don't think that for people out there that are like, they don't really see it that way, it can still happen as long as you're putting in those daily efforts every single day. But it literally is every single day for all those like coaches out there. Cause I get a lot of that, coaches that like want to know the secret recipe or whatever. And I'm like, dude, it's not one, if you're thinking that it's a business model, it's not. It doesn't make sense to do what I do. I have right now, we're building a gym. I have a gym. I make no money at either gym. There's no profits. There's no memberships. It's not rational to do this, right? It doesn't make sense. It's not like a profitable business model. It's just purely based on like desire and passion, and whatever we do make, I put it back into the team, right? So it has to, it's not, if you're thinking too much business, I think too on those things, like especially with competitors, oh, I want to be the next Miss Olympia because it's going to make me $1 million, because I will then after that be a coach that everyone knows and respects, or I want to be the next Team Elite Physique because I want to make money or whatever, right? I'm like, well, if that's the motivating factor, it's probably a limited time frame where you can keep that habit going, because it's not a true thing. Like when you get there, it's irrelevant. The money's irrelevant. You live just as good at a X dollar amount versus, you know, millions and millions. Like there's really not a significant difference. You just adjust your lifestyle. So once you realize that your motivating factor, that being the case, it kind of dies off, and then you die off. And so it's got to come from somewhere else is what I think, and just your daily habits. So at least in my experience, you know, I guess I went off there.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
No, I like that.
I'm good, 'cause we all have different ways of going about things.
Yes.
I guess there is no right or wrong. I guess my fear is always disappointing myself. So I guess that's why I'm super conservative with my goals. And then when I do meet my goal, and sometimes I even exceed the goal, right? Sometimes I even exceed the goal. And when I exceed the goal, I'm like, whoa, I'm on cloud nine. Because not only did I meet the goal, but I exceeded it. And I think that's like the best feeling ever, rather than, kind of coming in with like the expectation, like I'm going to win. And then, you won, then it's like, oh, I expected that anyway. Whereas kind of like, come into the mindset of like, I tried my best, I can do what I can do. And then win, that's, whoa, I exceed the goal. But it's also different because like a difference between a number goal or I guess set in stone goal, like let's say somebody's goal is to win first place at a show. That's something you can like measure. Whereas something like I want to build a big gym can be very broad, and who knows what or how you can go about getting that. Whereas something as a placement is more detectable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I get that. And I think a lot of people run into that issue, like we talked about a little bit earlier, of that instant, like they're having success, they're setting themselves up for success, they think they're going to win, and all of a sudden they don't. And then they go through this like spiral, this just downward spiral. I run into that very often when it's someone who's always done good at everything they've done in their life. And they've always been like, it's kind of a weird scenario, especially in bikini, because sometimes you get athletes in bikini who are ex-athletes like Ashley and whatnot, and they're usually more trained for losing, right? Oh, I lost to whoever once I reached a higher level or whatever, like when you were running track and you started running against different countries and stuff, like that was harder then, right? And you got used to that. And now you have this mentality set of, I'm going to do my best, right? But if someone never ran into losing, it was, and you see it a lot in bikini, because a lot of times you have people who haven't done any real sports, and this is their first like sport. They might have been in high school cheerleading, not in like competitive cheerleading, and they were the prettiest girl in school, and the guys are always saying yes to them. They're always had that positive affirmation. Oh, you're so pretty, you're this, you're that. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, now I'm fit, and I've always been kind of fit, and now I'm just going to go and win this show because that's what I do. And then they go and then they get like fifth, sixth place, and like, what just happened? The world just gets real out of nowhere, right? And I've seen that happen multiple times, and then it's just like confidence goes down, everything just spirals out of control. And it's crazy to see it, because it's like, wow, that's a hard thing to lose for the first time after you put in probably your most effort is probably a pretty tough pill to swallow. I played hockey one season. We lost every game. It was so bad. And so that was like, I was like, man, I got used to losing real quick. Yeah. That was the worst. I remember that season, and it's still like it's still like now it's like the happiest, because it's so funny that we actually lost every game this season. Our team was called the Gravediggers. My mom makes fun of me. She's like, you guys dug your own grave that year.
Yeah.
I was like, how did we lose every game though?
How did you get that mascot name or
every
team name?
game we named ourselves? It was like one of my first hockey teams, but it was so. But how does someone deal with that? Like that loss? We kind of talk a little bit about it, but how does someone go from there, pick themselves up, and go to the next level and keep going, right? Because I've had it go the other way. I had one girl, and she was still, I'm not gonna say her name, still one of the best girls I ever worked with. She was crazy good. Lines were perfect, bubbly muscles, super pretty, great shoulder, and honestly, it was the local judges just weren't, the local judges just aren't as good as national judges. That's just the reality of things. And she got overlooked in a big show, and I think she just got overlooked. She ended up getting like 12th place, and there was no way she deserved that placing. But then she just quit, never stepped on stage again. And honestly, I think she could have been easily like top 20 Olympia eventually type of girl. And just never, she was like, nope, I don't like it. She's like, it wasn't for me. Like, she's like, I always felt really pretty. It always felt really like I was going to do good. I always felt like the fittest in the gym. And after that, I just felt fat and ugly, and I just never want to do it ever again. Like, how does, like, you hearing that type of story and knowing that those things happen, like, how do you kind of prepare someone for that mentally?
Yeah, no, I love this topic of like the winner and loser mentality, because There's actually statistics about kids who come from lower socioeconomic status or rougher neighborhoods, you could say, who the suicide rate is a lot lower in those neighborhoods than it is in affluent areas, which is very interesting. The reason for that is because a lot of the people in the affluent areas, as soon as they hit hit reality or some portion of reality, it's very difficult. It's all consuming, it's heavy, it's intense, they can't face it, they weren't prepared for it. So preparing for it is important. If you know there's a possibility you could lose, then be prepared for that possibility. Why does that matter to you? How will that influence you? How will that impact you? Will it change what you're committed to? If losing is going to make you feel like this is no longer for you, then why is it for you right now? And by answering that question, you'll develop a deeper why that can actually help you to then go, it's not about winning, it's not about losing, it's just about how I feel committing to the journey to it, right? Like what Ashley was saying too, because it really is about that. So I think, if you're not accustomed to losing, then bodybuilding probably isn't for you either, because one person wins first place. It's not your local soccer team where everybody gets a trophy. It's not your school where you get grades and some are good and some are bad. This is not that way. You're going to place maybe first one weekend, and then you could drop down to 5th, 13th. I mean, even just look at the Tampa Pro results, what we saw compared to what happened at NorCal. There were some crazy difference in placements. You don't want to lose, don't compete in anything. Never compete. Don't even bother, because you're going to lose eventually, even if you're just losing on how you feel when you step into the gym that day, or losing in the sense of, oh, I said I was going to drink 1.5 gallons and I hit 1.25 gallons. That's a loss. You're taking an L because you didn't fulfill something you said you were going to do. So if you're not ready or willing to do that, don't compete. But if you're used to winning, tap into that energy, tap into that motivation. To use that winner's mindset to support you. And so I am a winner. I'm a winner because I feel that I did the best I could every single day. And if we can take away from the winners or loser mentality in terms of the trophies and the outcome, the placement, whatever, and just identify how are we winning or losing each and every day, that's going to impact how we feel when it actually is, judgment day, and they are telling us how we did. So I think, for the client that you described, it's really unfortunate that she couldn't see her potential because she was hurt by losing. It's unfortunate that she was distracted from what was possible because of what happened in an instant. And I think that's what's most unfortunate, is if we allow ourselves to get wrapped up in the instant moment, the one thing that happened, that one decision, that can steal us from all the possible decisions that is preparing us for. And that's what we have to remind ourselves of. It's not about the one show. It's not about the one outcome, the one trophy. It's about who you are in the process of all of these things. That's making you into the ultimate champion you want to be, or ultimate person you want to be.
I like that. Ultimate champion.
Well said.
The ultimate champion. The overall
champion of
champion.
Life.
Yeah, champion of life, bro.
Yeah.
That's cool. So do you have anything else you wanted to add to this? I'm sure.
I feel that, sometimes I feel like not necessarily a placement is a determining factor of how well I actually do, rather than like how I appear on stage that day. If I look my best, like for example, at the Olympia, a lot of people come up to me with the assumption that I'm disappointed because I got 5th or 6th or whatever at the Olympia. And I'm like, oh, did you see how I looked? Oh, I look good. Like that was the best I've ever looked. I'm proud of myself. You know what I mean? But a lot of people have this assumption that because I didn't win, I must be feeling like crap. And to be honest, like I didn't feel like crap until you said like, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. You know what I mean? That sympathy.
Yeah.
I hate when people feel sorry for me. Like, I'm like, no, I looked amazing. And I did better than I've ever done with my presentation. And my waistline was the best it ever was, whatever it may be. The times I will feel the worst is like when I show up for a show and I'm like, oh my God, I could have done that a lot better. Or I wasn't ready. There was one show last year I did, and I did it kind of like spontaneously just to see what I would look like as if I was softer, because I knew I wasn't ready. And I beat myself up about that so much because I'm like, I was not ready. I wasn't. I shouldn't have done it. That's when I felt the most regret, not showing up 100%. So it's not necessarily a placement, but how well I did. Or, there are little things like no show will ever be perfect. But if I make a major mistake, I beat myself up a little bit over it. But I realize I'm always learning regardless. Every show I learn, like, oh, even if it's something like I should have put my hair over to on this side instead of my right side, something small, I can always learn. But as long as I come into a show knowing like, I look good, this is the best I could have looked, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah. And you still placed though, by the way. The show, she's like, I was not ready. She was like a
Just to
little
be
softer,
clear.
and she still placed top 5. So whatever. But no, I remember that. But actually, it's cool. Is I think that's a good learning lesson for everyone out there too, because one, I think that it's important that people know, like out there, that there is no such thing as like the perfect bikini physique. There's the perfect bikini physique, like is a criteria literally for one day at that show, and that's pretty much it. And you're going to see different physiques win all the time. And so the one thing I do like about you is you are willing to take that risk and being like, hey, let's try to bring in a softer look. It might actually work for us. And then we did that and we're like, nope, doesn't work. Let's not do that again. But now it's almost like a haunting lesson. And we're like, no,
I don't want to look like that again.
I think you're 98.5%. We can't do the show. No. You can't do the show.
Only
100%. Yeah. So it's something like a learning lesson that was, I probably if anything, it helps us in the future.
Yeah, that's
motivation
true.
and stuff. So it's good to like tell people, hey,
exactly,
learn from your mistakes. Learn from them.
Not only that is like people got it. Like you touched on it earlier. There's always going to be a loss somewhere in your career, regardless. If you're on your way to the top, there's going to be an L along the way. And even our top Olympia competitors, nobody has a perfect record. No one.
Yeah.
Not the current Miss Bikini Olympia. Not last year's Bikini Olympia. No one has a perfect record.
Nope.
If you look back onto their stats, you'll see, oh my gosh, at this show, she tied for 16th. Yeah. And then this show, she got 6th. Okay, and this show, she got 2nd. This show, she got 1st. So it's kind of like, not that it's inconsistent as far as judging, but even bodies are changing, and phases are going in and out. Like, we're seeing this year a very extreme X shape, like very small waist, very wide shoulders. Whereas probably back when I was winning the Olympia, that wasn't a thing. It wasn't the look. So, looks are changing and there's more competition from all over the world. Whereas before it was just kind of like mainly in the USA. Now it's like expanded all over and it's becoming a worldwide sport,
Yeah, you had 4 of the top 6 from different countries in the Olympia this year.
Exactly.
Yeah, 4. That's crazy.
So just always keep that in mind. I think people need to realize, like, even if you didn't win the show, even if you got 7th place at your show, no one has won every single show they've done at the top. Yep. Nobody has a perfect record. No one.
Not even Phil Heath, or not even Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, none of them. Yep.
They've had L's. They've had L's along the way. They've had 3rd places, I'm sure, at some point, so it all depends. And especially with bikini, even more so with bikini than any sport or any division, I should say, there are a variety of physiques, right? Whereas bodybuilding, it's like, okay, biggest, most symmetrical wins, the leanest, biggest symmetrical guy wins. In bikini, it's more subjective, and also depends on who shows up that day. Like, for example, if you're a smaller girl, petite girl, you might get overshadowed a little bit or stand out either in a good way or a bad way if you're competing against some more muscular girls that day, taller girls, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you'll see weird placings too. Like we talked about last year, there was a girl who got 6th place, and then the next show she looked exactly the same and won the whole show. And then you saw that happen at Tampa again yesterday. One amazing competitor didn't even get a first call out at the last show she was at, and then gets in the top call out at this Tampa show. And it was like, man, dude, the swings are huge. And if you're not like prepared for that mentally, like you better start looking at even the top girls, because they are doing it and they're just bouncing back a week later doing another show. So that's just the way it goes. So probably talking your ear off here a little bit. Is there anything
we get passionate about that?
Yeah, right.
I love it.
Yeah, it's important. I think the mindset of growing and building on the last physique is important. And I think that, like, especially when it comes to like what we're talking about, our discussion of like rebounding and gaining all this weight, I'm so big, especially like lately, into the building on top of the last physique like mindset of always progressing forward and not creating space for anyone to catch up if you really want to be the best. Like you just never allow room for someone to catch up, because the days that you're taking off is the days that someone else is catching up, right? And so if you can just consistently progress that physique and progress your mindset and progress everything, then there's no choice that your body's going to have but to get a little bit better. And once you build on that and build on that and build on that, versus going backwards and then getting back to where you were and backwards and back to where you were, then that's when you build that, what do we call it, the grand, what do you call it, grand champion, or the, what do we call it?
Ultimate champion.
Ultimate champion, yeah. Ultimate champion of physique, and then in life too. And I think that's why I like contest prep so much. Is, you know, I've done this since all I can remember is all like this stuff, and there is zero doubt that me going through this for that long didn't have some correlation and some impact on my work ethic. Like I just know what it takes to be dedicated in this, and then it just kind of translated into my real world. And I think that that's such an important lesson. And I know I'm kind of like, I kind of go in that a little bit hardcore with like, hey, you know, stick to it like mentality. But this, even if you just do it one time, and I'm a big supporter of people who just do it one time, big supporter of people who just want to transform and like give themselves this like bucket list goal. It's going to translate into your life of dedication, of overcoming really like temptation and giving into like just giving into that little voice that tells you don't need to do this anymore, you know. And I think it's so important. It's going to affect your life so positively. You know, they talk about, one of the things I think I've mentioned before in our podcast was, you know, boxers, and they talk about a boxer, like once a boxer goes down the first time, like something changes and you see them start going down more and more and more. And it's a weird concept because this guy could have 17-0, right? And then one time he goes down, and then like something happens. So sometimes guys just get knocked out, right? And there's nothing they can do, but sometimes they just don't get up, right? And they're just, something clicked in their head where they gave into it one time. They gave into that, stay down. This is hard. It's not worth it. This guy's kicking your ass, right? And then it went from them being a warrior their whole life that was undefeatable, the Mike Tyson mindset, right? To, dang, this guy's beating me, I'm staying down. And then it's so much easier to go back to that. After they go down that one time, it's so much easier for them to give into that voice. And that voice gets louder and louder and louder. And so that's why I like the contest prep, because it kind of shuts that voice up for a while, you know, and you train yourself, hey, I can shut that guy up in my head who's telling me this is uncomfortable, who's telling me this is too hard, you know, and that it's not worth it. Like, so I'm a big fan of everyone doing it. Honestly, I think it should be like a government mandate. You do one prep in your life because it's going to affect the rest of your life so positively. Like it's going to be, you're going to be so thankful that you did it and you went through that process. I just don't think there's a process harder than this. You know, I think that it takes so much out of you 24/7 for a period of time. And then you really learn a lot about yourself in it. So I'm really grateful for contest prep even being a thing, you know, because it's just such a positive thing in my life. But, is there anything that you want to end with, Ash? Anything
I think we should have Celeste end with some words of wisdom.
Yes.
Anything you would like to tell competitors out there, you know, especially the ones that are down in the dumps right now because they're unsure of their season. What last words do you want to end on? Words of wisdom.
Well, there's so many amazing golden nuggets that have been said throughout this whole episode, I think, from all of us. And I guess just branching off of the last little conversation is understand that in order for you to win and in order for you to be a winner and feel your best, it may look different than what's required or what's being demanded of or what's being showcased by someone else. And know that, you know, what someone might consider a step back for you could really be what you need to propel forward. Just because it's a step back for them doesn't mean it's gonna, you know, cause you to lose or fail or be the worst out there. And I think that if we can give ourselves more grace in finding the process that's going to work best for us, that's important, which means if you've fallen off or whatever you want to call it, if you've fallen off of a track, instead of trying to jump back on it, instead ask what was wrong with the track that made you fall off of it and figure out if there's an adjustment that needs to be made and be okay with making that. So I think that's, you know, all I want to say is just like find what truly works for you and be ready and willing to honor that, even if it means the process to the outcome looks different and the timeline looks different. Do it because the long-term vision and the long-term goal is going to be achievable that way.
Okay, and with that, I want to give you a real quick plug here. Now you have this. So this is something Celeste does for her. This is what she does for work. And if you guys are struggling with anything, not able to stick on plan, want to get mentally better at this part of it, how can people get a hold of you and hear about your programs? Now, the main program that you work off of is called, it's an acronym, I'm forgetting the letters, PTG process, right?
Yeah, the PTG process is what I use in like majority of my programs. It's peace through growth. So whatever the growth is you're looking to achieve, we're finding peace through that process and making sure that there is a growth in that. So I work with people primarily in their relationship with food in my food relationship healing program, and then in my post-show blues program. So if someone wants to get in touch with me, they can just follow me on Instagram, celestial_fit, or visit celestial.fit. That's www.celestial.fit.
And how's that spelled real quick, just so we can get that out there?
Yeah, for sure. So CELESTIAL.fit or _fit if it's Instagram.
Okay, cool. And with that, we will leave you with those golden nuggets, as she said. Thank you so much for, it's so appropriate because we're in Vegas too, and there's a golden nugget casino, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. And then another thing, she's going to be coming out to Vegas. I don't know when, or Denver, but I think she said Vegas for sure at one point.
Yeah, I'm going to make it happen. Either way, I'm coming to the contest prep center. I'm so sad about Colorado being canceled. Like, I'm so sad, but regardless, I'll be there. I'll make it happen.
All right, cool. Well, I'll see you soon, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.